Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Church. It's such a beautiful day, and I'm glad to see every one of you. Welcome to those joining us online. Welcome to our friends from the UU Church in Ogden. Everybody say hi, Ogden. Hello. We're so glad you're here, and welcome to everyone joining us online. I have a few announcements as we begin this morning. First, most important announcement is our church auction. This is the biggest fundraiser of the church year. It's also our biggest social occasion when all the 9 o'clockers and the 11 o'clockers and the whatever o'clockers all get together in one room, and it's really lovely. So we'd like everybody to come. Tickets are on sale now. You can buy them in Elliott Hall. You can also buy them online. If the ticket price is too much for you, it is no problem. We still want you to be there. All you got to do is just let the ticket folks know, and we're happy to cut you a break. We want everybody to be there, and we don't want cost to be an issue. We also are looking for people to sponsor a table at the auction. We're looking for people who can donate items to the auction. You can do it at the table, or you can go in your Torch email, and there's links to the website, which are live now, and you can do it when you get home. Thank you in advance, and I'm looking forward to seeing you. A few other announcements. Here's a couple of quick things that came in. Tomorrow, the UU Church in Boise, Idaho, is having an online event for Indigenous Peoples Day, which will feature Darren Perry, who is the former chairman of the Northwest Shoshone Band here in Utah. But he's doing this panel with the UU Church in Boise. All you need to do is click the link. So if you would like the link to that, come see me after service or send me an email and I'll forward it to you. After our worship service today, the search committee is hosting what we call cottage meetings, which is just little gatherings up to 15 people. Anybody can drop in. If you haven't had a chance to talk to the search committee yet about what you're hoping for as our new minister comes on board, this is your chance. So please go. It's in room 219. Yes. And honestly, even I couldn't tell you where that is, but there are signs like all over the building. It's upstairs. It's over there. If you need a hand to guide you, I will personally take you there. We'll figure it out together.
Super easy way.
Okay. Ian's got the easy. How do you know the easy way when you've been here a year and I've been here 5 years?
Because I get lost so much. If you're just in Elliott Hall, right in that corner, there's a stairwell that goes up. If you get to the top of that stairwell, it's directly in front of you.
Is it?
Yeah, it's that old, it's...
where the couches
It's
are?
She Who Shall Not Be Named's old office.
Got it.
So go up those stairs, and it's like immediately in front of you. And
Well,
Tim
gosh.
Chambless is facilitating today, so you
Who's
don't want to
with you,
miss
Tim?
it. Oh my gosh.
Is it just Heather? So Tim or Heather can
Yeah.
lead you up there. All right, I'm off the hook. Sweet. So one last thing that I want to mention is it's spooky season, one of my favorite times of the year. And one of our ways that we like to celebrate spooky season is with the religious education trunk or treat. It's going to be on the 30th, which is a Sunday. It's going to be after the 11 o'clock service. If you want to, you can decorate your trunk and have some trunk-or-treaters. You don't have to have a kid in the program. It's enough to just like spooky season, right? Who doesn't like spooky season? However, if you don't decorate a trunk, you got to get your car out of that parking lot before it starts, or we're going to put you in a costume. And you have to stay. So that's the deal on that. Did I get everything? Hymnals. Wow, look, these little blue pennants represent the hymnals that we haven't yet purchased for the chapel. We're going to sing out of the teal hymnals today. They have so much more music than we're used to, wonderful songs. These are not hymnals for you to take home. They're hymnals that you're purchasing for the chapel, and they will live here. So that we don't have to borrow the music department's chapel hymnals. You could also buy one for yourself. They're available on the UUA bookstore, but these are just for here. And they're $20. So we really want you to buy one.
And they'll carry your dedication.
Right. We're going to put your name in it. So, like, they'll remember you. This is your chance to be famous, right? So please do that after worship today. Okay. Was that it? Oh, where's RC? Where did RC? Oh, there you are. Welcome, RC, to the pulpit once again. He's our lay minister today. Now let's begin our worship by lighting the chalice. And tomorrow, Indigenous Peoples Day. Glad to see so many people are starting to embrace this new way of recognizing the first Monday in October, choosing to transform what has been a day for mourning into a day of celebration for the first human caretakers of the lands of this nation. So today I light our chalice in celebration of the Shoshone, Ute, and Goshute people who populated the Salt Lake and Utah valleys before the pioneers, and in honor of all the indigenous peoples of the Americas, those still living, those erased in body and in memory. May we remember them as we live our lives where they once lived theirs. And now I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we sing together number 318.
Avoid Australian men was the relationship advice that a good friend from New Zealand gave me. A few years too late. Present company accepted, no offense. Several years ago, while on a research fellowship, I met an Australian scholar, and we grew very close to each other. Being with him made me realize that I was capable of romantic love, that the rush of feelings and desire that I thought I had dodged in my teenage years would instead unleash itself with extraordinary and undeniable intensity in my early 30s. Behind his roguish charms, there was a mutual capacity for us to listen to each other in sustained and meaningful ways. Lunchtime conversations and hours of online messages every night about our shared interests, in literature, current events, classical music, languages, and so on, seemingly endless. For the very first time, I was able to tune in to a part of myself, alien at the time, yet fiercely authentic, that was long buried by doubt and dismissed out of uncertainty and shame. Songs of love and poems of longing started to make sense. This act of listening to myself launched a long overdue excavation. I became attuned to what had laid untouched, silent in the strangest of depths, so that I could strive to bring it into the light. A few months after coming out to myself and to a few close friends, I felt that I had at last acknowledged a fundamental aspect of my life. Yet I also felt out of place in my own mind and body, dislocated in time by a belated first love. The long, dreaded silence with which I treated my attractions and desires meant that I had deprived myself of meaning and affirmation, of being heard with an alert mind and an attentive heart. Now, new ways of listening, of attunement, of awareness, and of recognition emerged and flooded my mind and spirit. All that I had thought was familiar now felt different and surreal, stirring with the unknowable void of uncharted territory. Even my own name started to sound differently in my head with all this new information. My first name, Ruen-chuan, is significant to my Taiwanese parents because it honors both sides of my family. Ren comes from my father's side and belongs to a cycle of 10 Chinese characters, each used in first names to indicate family members of the same generation and to link them with elements of nature. Ren is associated with water, and it means to nourish and nurture. Chuan is the legacy of my late aunt, the eldest of my mother's siblings, and a woman of both deep compassion and learning. For me, she chose the name of a fragrant grass associated with nobility and courtesy in ancient Chinese literature. In my name, Ruen-chuan, I have always heard my parents' hopes for continuing these family and cultural traditions, for nurturing nobility and courtesy. With both fervor and unease, I wondered how this knowledge stood in relation to my newfound sense of self. The two seemed distant and irreconcilable. One evening in New York City, fragrant with the smell of freshly mown grass in the warm, iridescent summer evening glow, I felt drawn to listening deeply to the meaning of Chuan, whose English equivalent I had never known. And I found myself roaming a maze of dictionary entries, encyclopedia articles, and illustrated guides to plants. Soon I grew still when I suddenly stumbled upon the English term for chuan, calamus. At first, it sounded like a strange name for a plant, calamus, because it was not very well known. But then I remembered. Calamus was the symbol of male same-sex desire in a sequence of poems from Walt Whitman's collection, Leaves of Grass. I was stunned to realize that feeling an attraction to men was in the meaning of my name all along, that it was not alien, and was instead irrevocably authentic. My name, Ruen-chuan, also means to nourish the calamus, to take care of the attractions and the desires that I have felt. Over time, the Australian scholar left me in and with a painful silence. But learning to listen with thoughtfulness and care has left an enduring and transformative impact. Being deeply attuned to what is present and striving to honor this presence guided me to a gift of self-knowledge, to the grace and empowerment of renewed affirmation. My coming out was also a homecoming, an assurance that my parents' hopes from the past were compatible with the journey I newly embarked on. Nurturing nobility and courtesy has shared and will always continue to share a space, a name, a spirit, and a person with nourishing the calamus.
I invite you now into a spirit of prayer, meditation, or reflection. We often take time to honor other people, though not often enough. But in this moment, I invite you to honor yourself. Every so often, it helps to remember who we are and remember that our worth is inherent. It's not a function of what we achieve or accomplish. What gives us value as people is just being, and just being who we are. So begin by giving your body the best, most supportive position that you can under the circumstances. Touch the earth with your feet if that's available to you. And draw your body tall, as if a string is lifting you from the back of your neck. You may close your eyes if you wish. Breathe in a full breath if that feels good to you. And feel it as a cool wind clarifying the inside of you. And then a warm breath announcing your goodness as it leaves your body. And now, honor yourself, the unique person you are, the singularity of your arising, the circumstances that resulted in your presence. It might have been otherwise, but it happened this way, and it's good. Honor your body, this vehicle that has gotten you this far. Some scarred, some bruised, others new and fresh. Every body is a good body, no matter what state it's in, because it's carrying a sliver of the divine. Easy to forget, easy to feel ordinary as we go about doing ordinary things like working or driving, or arguing with somebody on the internet. Easy to forget that all life, including this life, is sacred. Honor your connection to the land, whether it's this land, this salty, sandy land, or some other land where you've spent more of your life. Feel, if you can, the feeling of the dirt of that place in your fingers. You are made of that dirt in real, scientifically measurable ways. You are made of the dust of this earth and of the stars among which our earth makes its home. Her waters run through your veins. It's sacred. Honor your story. It belongs to no one else. No one else could live exactly this life. Your story, no matter how grand or how simple, no matter how privileged or how painful, has something to offer the world for its healing. It deserves the effort you put into telling it with gentleness toward yourself and the choices you made, knowing that you probably did the best you could do at the time. Honor your queerness. Yes, even if you are straight, even if you are cisgender, honor what makes you different. Honor the rebel in you, the nonconformist, the heretic, your too muchness. Honor the rainbow that you paint when you show up authentically. And when I say honor, I mean cheer for yourself. I mean, give yourself a trophy. Twirl around in your spinny skirt. Give yourself a little Tiger Woods fist pump. Yes, yes. Why not? Life is hard, but it's easier when we remember who we are and what we came from. And it's easier after you've taken time to honor yourself, to honor the 7 billion holy beings all around you. Life is short, but we're in it together, healing each other just by showing up the way we are, holding each other's hands, carrying each other through. As you go through this week, be your own cheerleader, and then be a cheerleader for someone else.
Good morning. I'm Cathy Chambless, and I'm a member of the Church Finance Committee, and I represent you, the congregation, on that committee. I'm here to tell you why I am a steward of this church. I was raised in Sioux City, Iowa, in a devout Catholic family. We were 2 parents and 5 kids. Our whole family went to Mass every Sunday. We did not eat meat on Fridays and went to confession on Saturday. During Lent, my family prayed the rosary on our knees every evening. I went to Catholic schools from kindergarten through my graduation from college, with the exception of 3 years in high school. So it was to my parents' great dismay and sorrow that in my senior year in college, that I was no longer a Catholic, that I told them, I announced to them that I was no longer a Catholic. Yes, it was at the age of 22 that I was seeking a different spiritual path. I was a Unitarian Universalist at heart, but I did not know what a UU was until at least 12 years later. It was at the age of 34 that Tim and I discovered this church on 13th East in Salt Lake City. And we have been coming here ever since. Dick Henry was the minister. Our son and daughter attended religious education through high school. We taught RE and sex education for junior high age kids. I served on the RE committee, the pledge drive, ministerial relations, endowment, the board of trustees, finance committee, and I survived 2 capital campaigns. It was through this church that I came to understand that ministry does not come solely from a priest, but arises from a covenant that we make to each other. Small group ministry is an example of this covenant. Ministry is enhanced by words of great thinkers from various traditions, by music, by meditation, and through celebrating births, marriages, and the lives of those who've passed. My list of reasons for supporting this church with volunteer time and money has changed, evolved, and lengthened over the years. For a time, it was Dick Henry and Tom Goldsmith's inspiring sermons that made me think and examine whether I was living up to my values. Then it was the broad religious education for our kids. In the mid-'80s, the RE committee consisted of 2 people, Barbara Creek and myself. I remember trying to select curriculum that covered different world religions. I wished I had that growing up. When I was on the board of trustees in the 90s, the board voted to establish the memorial garden in the southeast corner of the church with the glass-paned fence that memorializes past loved ones. A capital campaign raised funds to build the RE building. I have a strong memory of being on the board, and it was my terror at having to make announcements at Sunday service. The opportunities for social justice, welcoming refugees, preparing meals for homeless youth, supporting a West Side Catholic church. We slept overnight at the church for many months to protect a family seeking asylum, Vicky Chavez and her daughters. Sleeping overnight in the Haven, we eventually got used to being awakened around midnight when the janitor came in to vacuum. Over the years, it became the community of amazing people who come to this church, putting on Halloween parties, hosting circle suppers, planning summer forums, marching in the Pride Parade. And then there was solstice services. I have cringing memories of sitting in the chapel during solstice, feeling embarrassed by my husband's corny Mr. Son. And I couldn't admit it. Each year, when it's time to renew our pledge, I think seriously about all the competing needs in my life. It's always a struggle to keep up with the need and to keep it the same or to grow it to keep up with the church's need. At this point in my life, my primary motivation is to ensure that this church will continue to be a spiritual home, a haven, a respected and valued institution for others now and in the future.
The ushers will now come forward to take the offertory. If you would prefer to give online, there's a little card in your pew with a QR code, and you can just use your phone. It'll connect you to our giving page online. Thank you very much for your generous offering. So someone came up to me during coffee hour, and they were like, I can't wait to hear your sermon, because they're in the mystical class, which runs after this one. They're like, that's exactly what we're talking about. And I was like, I changed my sermon. I'm not preaching on that anymore. And he was like, oh, okay. But, that's how it works. Like on Tuesday, David's like, what's your sermon about? So I can prepare the music. And I'm like, this? It's on this? But as we got closer to the weekend, I didn't feel like preaching. It just wasn't speaking to me, right? This month is about listening to what's going on within you. And I was trying to not listen to that because I wanted to, write what I said I was going to write. And around Friday, I was like, no, we're going to listen. So this is a different sermon than the wisdom within. Maybe it's the same in a different way. Who knows? But tomorrow, many people in this nation will have the day off from work. It's one of the 4 federal holidays named for a human being. In this community, we say we say Indigenous Peoples Day, right? But that's what we say. That's not actually the name of tomorrow's holiday. It hasn't been changed yet. We're aspirational in that sense. So it's one of the 4 federal holidays named for a human being. The other holidays are Washington's birthday, which sometimes we erroneously observe as President's Day for very good reasons. We very much like Lincoln. More than Washington, sometimes. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday and Christmas Day, Jesus' birthday. It's a couple holidays. The remaining 7 federal holidays, there's 11 in total, observe pivotal moments or movements in our history. So Independence Day, Thanksgiving, Memorial Day, and most recently Juneteenth. The holidays are used to tell our story. They remind us of what's important to the narrative of the nation. And just like family stories that we repeat over and over and over again, right? We do that to tell the future generations where we come from. And the holidays, or the term that the word actually comes from, holy days, are like stars in the sky, between which lines are drawn and constellations of meaning are formed. So each of the human beings named in the federal holidays sit on our national altar like saints watching over us. We're comfortable with some, uncomfortable with others. But they all tell part of our story. The facts of these men are often shaded to create meaning instead of staying true to history, because we want them to represent values that we see in ourselves or we aspire to. The facts don't always align with the values, so we change the facts because it's more important to find ourselves in these constellations of meaning than to be factually correct. Christmas Day, Jesus' birthday, orients the nation in a Christian paradigm. Now, there are those among us who would like to quibble with that, but for the most part, I think we understand that the nation outside these walls is really directed by that narrative. This is the story of the God of the land. And certain local regions have their own textures. I used to live in New York, and the city added to the nation's narrative by giving school children days off for the high holy days, the Jewish high holy days. But these additional narratives are regional. They perhaps might have considerable influence, but not enough to place their gods on the national altar. Dr. King sits there as the redemptive saint, trying to save the soul of the nation from the crimes committed during its founding and its growth. His pastoral message, his prophetic message, and his martyrdom mimic the story of the central God on the national altar. But still, there are those who refuse to recognize his place amongst the saints. Indeed, in some places, they've avoided incorporating the story by calling the third Monday in January Civil Rights Day or Human Rights Day, just taking his name out altogether. In Mississippi, the state celebrates the holiday Lee King Day. Yeah, you already know where this is going. In order to recognize the birthday of Robert E. Lee, who is not even from Mississippi as far as I know. I think he's Virginia, right? Anyways. But again, this is a regional tribalism. Nationally, we recognize Reverend Dr. King as among the saints. There's Washington, our Abraham, if you will, the father of the nation. Mostly our children are taught myths about his honesty and military prowess. But there was no cherry tree, nor did he cross the Delaware standing up in a boat. The facts are not that important when you're trying to tell a story. But what he means, and what he means to us. And then there's Columbus, the most controversial of the saints, our Adam. He is our creation story as a nation. And in a parallel way, right, there are those who quibble about the textual inaccuracies of the Bible, and honestly, I don't really know what to say to these people. The Bible is not a historical document. It's not. It's a creation story of a people. That's what it is, which is fine. People orient themselves around stories to give meaning to their lives. And this is true of Columbus. What we are taught is hardly history, it's hagiography, a study of the lives of the saints. There may be facts on which the general narrative hangs, but certainly there are facts which have been omitted so as to keep the national narrative unencumbered. I mean, nobody really likes to start the story of a people with a genocide. And there's been a lot of effort put into reimagining this holiday, something else, Indigenous Peoples Day, for example. But the law has not yet changed. And there are those who see this reimagining as the tinny political correctness of Native Americans and so-called revisionist historians tarnishing the image of a hero. But this is a bit ironic, since Columbus Day is entirely revisionist in the first place. If we search for the meaning of Columbus Day, we need to look into the situations that brought the holiday, the holy day, into being. The storybook that I had as a child, I must have read this book 30, 50, I don't know how many times. I loved it, right? I loved this book. And it told of a man motivated by great curiosity. The desire to explore beyond the boundaries of what was known. He possessed a fearlessness and great faith, values that we like to tell about ourselves today. And in that children's book, it finished with what seemed like an unjust imprisonment by the ungrateful monarchs of Spain. I was so mad at the end every single time. Which is probably tells you what great propaganda it was. Because his own journals and testimonies written against him by contemporaries indicate that he was imprisoned because of his great cruelty and avarice. His willingness to torture and kill shocked even those who considered him a friend, and for centuries, he was actually disregarded. So why did the story of Columbus come back in such a way that we now have a federal holiday for him? The first known celebration of the arrival of the Europeans to what has come to be known as the Americas was held on October 12th, 1792 in New York City, marking the 300th anniversary of Columbus's landing. And no coincidence, the very next day, October 13th, the cornerstone for the White House was laid in the newly named District of Columbia. The fledgling country was in search of new roots. The new Americans had fought a bitter war to separate from the mother country, and in attempting to differentiate themselves from the colonial master and the colonial story, they reached deeply into the past to establish a new creation story, a new story of origin and founding, not one in England, but one here. It's not by chance that the capital of our nation, Washington, D.C., carries the names both of our first president and founding father and the man who established European dominion over these lands. That's intentional. The first Columbus Day, however, did not begin until the late 1860s. And there's been some disagreement about whether it was 1866 or 1869, but the celebration was led by Italians and Italian Americans who lifted up Columbus as evidence of their right to fully participate in American society. Now, some of you have seen signs or seen references to signs like "No Italians, no Irish, no Jews need apply." These were the great unwashed masses that were immigrating. Today, these signs seem anachronistic, given that the great umbrella of whiteness now includes all Europeans and those of European descent. But this was not always the case, and it's important to think about this celebration in the context of the day. If we assume the most conservative date and take 1869 as the official start of Columbus Day, we see that only 4 years before, the United States had finished one of the bloodiest battles that we have ever been involved in. And making it more painful was the fact that this so-called Civil War pitted family against family, brother against brother. At stake was the moral vision of the United States. Would we continue to enslave other human beings because of the color of their skin? The victory of the North ended slavery, and we quickly added the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, carving out a more inclusive understanding of citizenship. However, the destruction of the peculiar institution did not mean the destruction of white supremacy or the belief that white people were somehow, by God or science, inherently better than people of color and people of African descent in particular. But the country had been torn apart, and the power structure that kept Anglo-Saxon Protestants at the top was endangered. Italians, Irish, Jews, Europeans of all sorts, who had previously been excluded from the halls of power, offered a trade. We would assimilate into Anglo-Saxon culture, give up our language, give up our customs, and in return, we would support the notion of a new identity that had been growing over the past 200 years, the identity of the so-called white person. The concept of racial superiority had been around for a couple hundred years, but at the time, it also included a hierarchy amongst so-called whites. And we still hear echoes of this today in institutions like the Daughters of the American Revolution, or being able to trace your lineage to the Mayflower. Don't conjure up notions of legitimacy based on time, because people of African descent have been here just as long. They conjure up notions of purity, notions of a time before we were mixed, before white people called ourselves mutts. Utahns have your own particular version, of course. You have the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers. It's the same concept. Who's pure? Who's pure? I know. She's like, this is some crap. We agree. What was created in the wake of the Civil War in an effort to rejoin a nation torn in half was a new identity, a broad understanding of white people. And Columbus Day was the suture used to close the wound. Regardless of where we came from, the new white Americans could now reach back and claim our right to authority, our right to lead. And Columbus was our touchstone. He was an Italian who delivered the Americas to Spain, a mutt in his own right. In 1937, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, again following a traumatic series of events in U.S. history, made it a federal holiday. And in 1971, amidst the most recent expansion of civil rights, Columbus Day again was addressed by Congress and moved from October 12th to the second Monday in October, which is why many of you now have the day off. Whenever there is a serious threat to the white supremacist identity of the nation, the American Revolution, the Civil War, the Great Depression, the Civil Rights Movement, we return to Columbus and Columbus Day as a way of unifying the culture around so-called white values and history. This is not by chance. We may not be conscious of what's happening, but it's not by chance. And you may not like this Genesis story, but that's irrelevant. Columbus is a major constellation in our sky of meaning. Columbus was a horrible man. Indeed. So was Adam. And just like Adam, he raised Cain, and we have been murdering and colonizing one another ever since. It's part of our inheritance. You know, people have been writing commentary for centuries about the wives of Cain and Seth, the two of the three children born to Adam and Eve. If God created only these humans, how did they find wives, they ask? Which is a good question. Of course there were other people. They have simply been erased from the creation story. This is a type of colonialism. If you control the story, you are able to wipe other people out. Here in the Americas, there were other people. There are other people who still have to fight to keep their stories alive. But Columbus sits on the altar, and it's difficult to reframe the story because our existence here depends on him. By what authority do we have to be here if Columbus was wrong? Perhaps we don't have any authority to be here, which puts people into a corner and asks them to defend a man who perhaps we shouldn't. And so it goes in the United States. We are drawn to these extreme poles where a person defends one position at all costs while another person rejects the same position entirely. No solution can really be found because there's no willingness to see ourselves in the other person's position, or more poignantly, to see that person and their vision in ourselves. However, maybe there is another way in between honoring Columbus and removing him from the altar entirely. a way initiated by our southern neighbors. In Latin American countries, there's a holiday referred to as Dia de la Raza, Day of the People, in recognition of the fact that a new people were formed when Columbus arrived, people who were not just European and not just indigenous. It's a people born out of great trauma and also great love. Like the double helix of DNA, the twin strains of aggression and affection make up our identities in this hemisphere. We are the product of murder as well as love. Shadow sides, light sides. I'm not in favor of forgetting Columbus, nor am I in favor of honoring him. He is my shadow side, an essential part of the fire in which I was forged, and I never want to ignore my shadow side for fear of having it overtake me. Indeed, the shadow can be very seductive. One of the lesser gods, desire, readily works as its minion. But something must be done. Some accounting must be taken. There are people who've been ignored, who've been passed over, who have had no account taken of their lives and no meaning attributed to their loss and suffering. Indeed, we continue to make these people into faceless beings, things even, so we are not burdened by their story. This cannot stand. But accounting for people is not enough. And there are ways to retell the Columbus story, but this also is not enough. We must find ourselves in the Genesis story, acknowledge our ancestor as complicated as he is, recognize our inheritance. We don't remove him from the story. How could we? Who would we be? Instead, we must add to it. We don't do this only by rewriting history books but by making living history as communities today. Communities invested in healing the wounds created by the founding of our people. Many of you will have the day off tomorrow as our nation wrestles with its worship of Columbus. Don't turn away as if he doesn't matter. He matters immensely, just as Adam matters to the biblical narrative. But we must not be canonical. There were other people present in the biblical stories that have been erased. There's nothing we can do about that. We can ensure that it doesn't happen in our national story. But this is not enough. We must assume our responsibilities for the Columbus story as well. If we abandon it, other people will use it in ways that do not serve us and do not serve humanity. There was a new people formed in this nation, but the allurement and the promise of purity, of supremacy, has kept us chained to the worship of trauma. If we are to move as a moral community, if we say that we stand for justice, if we stand for equality, then there can be no greater question on our minds than how can we abolish the cult of whiteness and the allurement of purity. The killing Columbus brought to these shores has not stopped. And it will not stop until those of us who are called white become traitors to the race and whiteness is abolished. And we're starting to see support for this, perhaps more support than we've ever seen before. This is why we seem to be facing one of those critical moments in history when Columbus has been so important in the past. Those clinging to the values codified in whiteness, the ones Columbus represents on our national altar of meaning, have called for another civil war. It's not a battle over taxes or regulations or environment or states' rights. These are technical issues, and we don't have a technical problem. We have an identity problem. And this can't be solved with technical solutions. The technical problems become so onerous that we can spend all of our time fighting them. But they'll never go away until we solve the identity problem. It's a battle over identity. Who are we? So tomorrow I will recognize a day of the people, a people forged from great trauma and great love. We all have our work to do. If we want to be free, your work looks different from my work. It's not all the same. Those like me who carry who carry the whiteness must take purity off of the altar and replace it with emancipation. It won't be easy. But whiteness is destroying us, all of us. And I pray that those of you who are in this category like I am will choose the death of whiteness, and in doing so will choose life for yourself. Amen. Please join in our next hymn. It is number 1017 in the Teal hymnal. Source of life, God, my darling, fill us with wonder that allows us to truly see, witness even, the worth and the dignity of every being, inherent just because they are here, just because they've arisen, not because they've been in this land longer or anything like that. You have worth and dignity just because. Awaken us to our deep interwovenness, space beyond the barriers and the fences of purity, those on the in and those on the out, even beyond birth and death, where we all exist in the presence. And fill us with grace so that we might embrace our great calling, that we might find our courage to build on this great altar of meaning a new way of love and hope and justice. Amen. Thank you so much for coming today. The service has ended. Great thanks to Tristan and David and Monica and Rentren and Cathy, who all participated in making it what it was today. Don't forget, we have cottage meetings. The Ian's secret pathway is straight through this door. You'll find the stairs in the other way. Just go up, and Tim and Heather will lead you through the cottage meeting process. First 15 up there, get a seat. Also, if you didn't get a teal hymnal and you really wanted to sing today, grab one of these, and we'll make sure that there's enough in the pews for next time. They're $20 each. We'll take them right outside. All right, let's go have some coffee together. Thank you for coming.